My name is Garnett Weber, CEO of Itracks. We are excited to host the webinar, Quantifying the Environmental Impact of Online Qual. According to McKinsey, companies with high sustainability metrics are consistently outperforming the market. It has gone from being something that would be nice to have to a must-have, and that includes all types of businesses from small to Fortune 500 companies. Itracks was very fortunate to have Jacqueline Gorman, a registered Sustainability Excellence Associate, assist our company in assessing our sustainability metrics last year. During the process, a method to help quantify the environmental impact was designed. We are excited to share this with you today. Our presenters for the webinar include Dan Weber. Dan attended the University of Saskatchewan, where he obtained a Bachelor of Science. He then acquired the practical knowledge of traditional market research while working for a management consulting firm. It was while working for this firm that he conceptualized the idea of taking traditional market research online. In 1996, Dan co-founded Itracks, a pioneer in online surveys and online qualitative software. Dan has since built Itracks into the leading qualitative research provider that it is today. Dan has been instrumental in facilitating key clients to use and co-create Itracks qualitative software as a service platform. Dan's passion is bringing value to clients through technology and innovation. We also are honored to host Jacqueline Gorman. Jacqueline Gorman is a registered Sustainability Excellence Associate with Green Business Certification, Inc., and has been trained through the Greenhouse Gas Management Institute. Jacqueline is Trace's practice area lead for remediation and risk with over 20 years of experience in environmental consulting. Jacqueline has led multidisciplinary teams conducting risk assessment and natural science projects through Western Canada and has acted as a subject matter expert for Asset APEGA Joint Board of Examiners for over 5 years. Jacqueline has been invited to speak at conferences in Western Canada about sustainability program development for small to medium-sized enterprises. Go ahead.
Excellent, everyone. It's Dan Weber here. Thank you for joining us today. For those of you that don't know, although I've been involved for 25 years with this organization, building software, I actually have an environmental studies degree. And so while I didn't fully understand some of what we're going to be talking about today because I've been removed for so long, the environment and sustainability has been part of kind of my thread or well-being for years. I'm an avid outdoorsman. I enjoy participating in anything that's one might consider sustainable or environmental, and so it was very interesting to me when I started seeing on RFQs or bids for clients, these questions often buried in the securities document about whether we had a sustainability plan. And we recycle our cans and some of our paper around here, but I didn't really understand the extent of what was all involved. And so that's when I reached out to Jacqueline, and she started talking to me about something that was bigger, something that involved a number of different aspects, but certainly was becoming very, very important. And so today we have a bit of an agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about just what sustainability plans are and why they're actually important to research firms and why it is important that they build one for themselves. Within that plan, there's a whole portion or part of it that we worked on around carbon emissions. And again, we do our part as an organization in our office and pieces and parts. But out of that review, we discovered something that was quite significant, and we'll talk a little bit about that today, just in the fact that doing focus groups online as opposed to in person and the impact that can have on the reduction of carbon emissions. So we'll speak more to that today. And then from there, we're just going to talk a little bit about how we came up with the numbers, both how we assessed the difference between online and in person, and then look at the impact that that's having on. And then going forward, talk a little bit about how you can use this information when you're approaching clients within the industry. And finally, we'll have a bit of time at the end for some questions, and hopefully we can wrap it up and have you on your way. So Jacqueline, I'm going to pass it over to you, and let's get started.
Well, thank you, Dan, for inviting me to participate in something that I'm really passionate about. And thank you, Garnett, as well. It was certainly my pleasure to learn alongside you while you were learning about sustainability. I was learning about market research, and it was definitely a worthwhile journey for me, and hopefully also for you. So the big question that we're hoping to answer is, why are sustainability plans important for research firms? And in order to understand that, we need to back it up just a little bit. Why are sustainability plans important at all to any firm? And what is a sustainability plan? What is sustainability? So we start right at the basics so that we all have sort of a common understanding of what we're talking about. I like to refer to the definition of sustainability that was developed in 1987 by the Brundtland Commission, which was a United Nations commission that referred to sustainability as the ability to meet the needs of the present generation, without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. So that's a pretty overarching and heady concept. And how do you apply that as a business? It seems quite far removed. Since sustainability has developed over several decades and developed kind of independently in nations across the world, there's a whole variety of frameworks and definitions that can be referenced. And while the world is working towards finding some commonality in how it communicates and around sustainability, I tend to refer to the mental framework that's based around the triple bottom line, or the 3 pillars. And this is a concept that I introduced to Itracks in our work together. And the triple bottom line envisions, in order to have a healthy economy, it must be embedded within a healthy society. And for a society to be healthy, it needs to be located within and reliant upon a healthy environment. So you can't have one of these without the other. And within this framework, all of these concepts can be scaled. The economy can be the global economy. The economy can be, the financial success of a small business, or anything in between. Dan, do you want to head over to the next slide? Thank you. So now we understand what sustainability is and how a business needs to interact with society and the environment in order to be financially successful, to support the success of the current generations and those in the future. Why would a business actually be interested in developing a sustainability program? And there's lots of research that's been done on this topic. The information I have here was actually taken from Harvard Law School research that was conducted in 2020. They gathered information from over 100 large corporations and asked them, why do you have sustainability programs? What drew you to this space? And these are just the top few. There's a long list that came out of this study. Top of the list was fiduciary duty. They want to manage their money well, and having a sustainability program helps them do that. Regulatory compliance was another one. They either had a legal obligation to report their sustainability metrics, or having a sustainability program helps them track their other legal obligations and make sure that they continue to comply. Other businesses drawn in because it helped them mitigate their ESG risk. So ESG is one of the alphabet soup of an acronyms that follows the sustainability world. It stands for environmental, social, and governance concepts. So environmental and social tend to be kind of self-explanatory. Some folks have a little bit more trouble envisioning what does governance mean when it comes to sustainability. Governance refers to how you manage your business in order to ensure that it is a sustainable business, that it continues to operate as a healthy business so that it can serve society and protect the environment. And so topics that fall under the governance umbrella tend to be things like ethics and corruption, disaster management planning, and sort of things like that. So making sure that your business encompasses both environmental, social, and governance topics is a reason that some businesses are drawn to develop sustainability programs. Keeping up with market standards. Nobody wants to be viewed as a laggard when all their competitors are doing something more advanced. Avoiding reputational risk is another thing that draws businesses into sustainability programs. And there's always wanting to do the right thing. You know, it feels good to make the world a better place. So that's another reason why lots of businesses are drawn to this. And the list is long. Those are just the top few. And for small businesses, some of the ones that are farther down may actually be placed higher up in the ranking. For small businesses, finances can be quite important. And things like improving the amount that they spend on their utilities, reducing the cost of the raw products, reducing employee turnover so that they don't have to pay for recruitment and training are also important for smaller businesses. And so all businesses, regardless of the size, if they want to establish a sustainability program, need to go through a number of steps in order to get there. And this is a common path for businesses of any size to go through. My business did this. Itracks went through this process as well, and started with a gap assessment. So most successful businesses are already doing things that are sustainable. They're already listening to their clients and taking care of their employees. They're already reducing the amount of stuff that they buy. It's just good business practice. But it's not necessarily identified as a sustainability practice. So by gathering all those good things that a business is doing and listing them out, helps them understand all the good things it's doing as far as sustainability goes. And by comparing that to their peers and to industry best practices, it can help a business understand not only what they're doing right, but where they have room to improve. And then the next step in developing a sustainability program is a materiality assessment. So for all of the different sustainable activities that a business could undertake, which ones actually matter to the success of the business? And you can determine that by gathering information from your stakeholders. So what do your employees think is important, and your clients and your supply chain? And what does the International Reporting Agency identify as important for your industry? And by gathering all that information, you can help narrow down environmental sustainability topics to those that actually matter for your business, that you have the ability to influence and that can support the success of the business as a whole. And with that information in hand, you can develop a vision. You know what you're doing now and what the possibilities are for the future. How do you see your business? What's the vision for your sustainability in the future? And how does that align with your general vision for your business as a whole? Because the vision for your business and your sustainability vision need to be intertwined and embedded in order for it to be successful and sustained in the long term. You can't have them going off in opposite directions. So at this point, then you know what you're already doing, where you are now, and where you want to be. And roadmap helps document how you're going to get there. How do you get from where you are to where you want to be? And it just lists what activities are we going to undertake, who's going to do it, when are they going to do it by, how do we know we're finished, how do we manage change management within our business? How do we garner support? Are there things in the long term that we need to start on now in order to achieve? And so all of that information kind of fits into a roadmap. And then the last piece of the puzzle is reporting. So this is telling your stakeholders, what are you currently doing and what are you working on? And as with every piece, this can be scaled to suit the size of the business. For large corporations, they produce documents that are hundreds of pages long that satisfy the needs of international reporting agencies. For a small business, it could be something as simple as an internal memo and a social media post, or anything in between, depending on what's material to the business. Thanks. And the next slide, please.
So Jacqueline came to us and presented this, I would say, more global project than what I had originally envisioned. But out of it, I was finding, and she made this point before, that there are areas that we are already having an impact. There's things that we're doing that that were making a difference, but yet it wasn't well organized, and it wasn't really planned well. But one of the bigger things that we realized is that, you know, why was it important for research firms specifically? And you know, I was seeing these things on RFPs. I was seeing these plans being pushed forward, and I was starting to understand or believe that, you know, having a sustainability program was influencing our capacity to win work. And where it hadn't necessarily been in the past. How I was operating my business from an environmental standpoint or social standpoint hadn't come to the forefront, but maybe it was being discussed, but now it's becoming more and more prevalent. You know, we're hearing more and more about publicly traded corporations really getting pressure to demonstrate a green supply chain, to become you know, carbon neutral. And through that, choosing companies that have these types of plans. I think just in nature, the research industry works hard to represent all populations. I think it's a very important piece that the industry does as part of our practice. And so by engaging in a sustainability program, one that encompasses not only you know, all parties or people, but also, you know, globally what the impact might be on the environment. And then I think it also, by having one of these, a sustainability program, it begins to support you know, the recruitment and retention of employees. Having a program like this is becoming important to people that are looking at working at your organization. So for all of these reasons, we said, well, you know, let's get started and let's figure out what we can do here. Out of this bigger plan, though, came a piece of it was, you know, what's your carbon emissions impact? Like, what is our footprint? And again, we went through this process of understanding how much we use in our organization, air conditioners and lights and so on. And then what we realized is that there was a practice that we were doing that was or had a significant impact. When Jacqueline talked to us about, she said, describe to me about how focus groups worked in the past, how they work now, how you apply them. And it was then when she said, well, you know, this is actually maybe bigger than you think, Don, because where focus groups are done traditionally, and it involved, you know, a lot of activities that had a more significant impact from a carbon standpoint. We've removed some of those by doing them online. Now, as a researcher and working with researchers for 25 years now, we are guided by the principle of providing the best option for research for our clients. That can include traditional, that can include online. We have this tool chest, we call it often, of options. What hadn't been considered in the past is this impact. And I think that has now come to the forefront in making the decisions on what we recommend to clients and how they do it. If they have a, you know, very stringent carbon emissions plan or program, perhaps this is an option for their research, doing it online as opposed to in person. So we are asked to assess what looked like a traditional project, and from that we could assess the impact that a online focus group had in terms of carbon emission savings over a traditional focus group. And again, I'm not pitting one over the other. There's all kinds of reasons why a researcher would do one over the other. I'm just simply stating that in doing it one way, it does have this impact. And so we looked at, actually, I got very interested in this. I looked at hundreds of past studies. I talked to our clients and many market researchers, and we identified three major contributing factors in a traditional focus group. There were travel, accommodation, and facilities. And through that, we agreed on what we might consider an average project and with a number of groups. Now, again, a project could include a local, a local moderator with a local audience, one or two groups at a local facility. The client maybe logs in online and watches those groups, and that might have a relatively small carbon impact. Other projects are international in nature. They involve a ton of travel, lots of movement by different moderators, and so those may have more. So our challenge is coming up with something that was kind of what would we consider in the middle. And so what we decided on for our calculation was really a project constituted, for this calculation, 2 focus groups in each of 4 cities. And it also included 2 client observers per group. And of course, they're traveling from city to city as well. 8 participants per group, and asked to drive an average of, or take public transportation, an average of 20 miles. And then 3 nights hotel stay for each of the researchers and the clients before returning home on after the 4th locations groups. So that's how we described a project to set the stage for now. Jacqueline going back and looking at, well, what's the difference between doing this online as opposed to doing those groups in person? So.
Yeah, so when determining the carbon footprint of a project, or even measuring the carbon impact of a business as a whole, there are some pretty detailed and strict rules that should be followed. There's for information that actually wants to be is to be provided for regulatory reasons or for carbon trading and such. There's some really strict rules that need to happen, including who can conduct the calculations and what needs to be included. And I had the pleasure of actually working with Monique Wismer, who has almost 20 years of experience dealing with greenhouse gas inventories. She got in early on, and I'm happy to have her as a colleague. And so together we worked with Iitracks to help them understand this bigger question. And just to understand a little bit of how greenhouse gas calculations happen, I'll provide a wee bit of background. For all calculations, it's necessary to include both Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions, and Scope 3 is optional. So when I talk about Scope 1, it includes greenhouse gases that are emitted due to on-site combustion, like your natural gas furnace to heat your building, and also mobile sources. Do you have a fleet of vehicles that the company owns? Other types of on-site combustion could be, do you have a diesel generator to manufacture electricity on site? So all those things, anything that involves combustion that is within the control of the company itself is included in Scope 1. Now, most businesses don't actually generate their own electricity, at least not wholly, and end up purchasing electricity from a state grid or a provincial power grid. And so that electricity or steam that is purchased from outside of the business is included in Scope 2. And each state has sort of a different greenhouse gas emissions associated with the electricity they produce, because they'll have a different mix of, is there power generated by coal, or how much is generated by hydroelectric power? And so there's definitely localized greenhouse gas emissions that are specific to each locality. And then as scope 3 are emissions that are induced by the operations of the business. So these are things that happen outside of the business's control, but wouldn't have otherwise happened if the business didn't exist. So this is things like employee commuting. The business doesn't really have a say in whether or not their employees live close to the office or far away, or whether or not they take a bike or a bus or a gas guzzling older vehicle. And also all of those kinds of emissions that are beyond the control of the business are included in scope 3. And large publicly traded corporations are now getting pressure by their shareholders to talk about their scope 3 emissions. And that includes their supply chain. And that's where market researchers may see a need to provide information to these clients. Next slide, thanks, Dan. So when we talk about greenhouse gases, most people talk about carbon or carbon dioxide, but there are actually a whole bunch of different chemicals that can reside in our atmosphere and reflect radiant heat back to the earth. And the ones that internationally have been agreed upon to be included in greenhouse gas calculations include not only carbon dioxide, but also methane, nitrous oxide, and along with carbon dioxide, these can be either man-made or naturally occurring. And then a handful of man-made chemicals that are sort of prevalent in industry and have a really powerful greenhouse gas effects. And those are hydrofluorocarbons, perfluorocarbons, sulfur hexafluoride, and nitrogen trifluoride. And luckily, you don't actually have to remember any of this, other than the fact that all of these different gases have a different ability to reflect radiant energy back to the earth. And to be able to compare one project to another, one technology to another, one business to another, all of these different chemical compounds are converted to an equivalent volume or mass of carbon dioxide, so that there's an ability to compare. And so this process of conversion actually happened in the Iitracks calculation process as well. Next slide, Dan, thanks. So when working with Iitracks on understanding the difference between in-person and online research, and excuse me if I'm using the wrong terminology, the research piece is a little bit new to me. I'm more comfortable with the sustainability terminology for sure. So we looked at, as Dan mentioned, a couple of pieces, air travel. Dan mentioned 900 miles, sort of an average. And so we used published research, peer-reviewed published research regarding emissions based on medium-haul air flight in the US, and use those values in our calculations. For vehicle travel, yes, people coming to a focus group could take a bus or a bike. We chose a passenger vehicle and assumed that each participant arrived independently. And because there are different emissions for different types of vehicles, we chose a US standard, again, using published peer-reviewed data. For hotel electricity and hotel natural gas, we made the assumption that it was sort of a mid-grade hotel, nothing super fancy, and it was a hotel that had refrigeration and food services on site. Now, we were unable to find peer-reviewed published US data regarding facilities that were constructed specifically to serve focus groups. So we made the assumption, and made the assumption clear in the document that we created, that we assumed that the emissions from a focus group facility would be very similar to the emissions from a hotel conference room. And those values, peer-reviewed, scientifically validated information is available. So that's the information that we included. And we also made clear sort of what wasn't included in our calculations. We didn't include the greenhouse gas emissions that were related to having food delivered to your focus group, any waste disposal that was generated and necessary at a focus group. We deemed those as sort of a less critical piece in calculating the overall savings. And through all of this, as is sort of mandated by standard calculation methods, we made conservative assumptions. So the amount of savings that we are calculating are most likely less than those that are actually being achieved. We err on the conservative. And thanks, Don. So here's the final numbers. At the end of this calculation process, we determined that approximately 500 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions were saved per group that is hosted online as opposed to in person. And given the fact that Iitracks has conducted over 100,000 virtual focus groups over their lifetime, it's resulted in a net savings of 51,000 tons of carbon equivalent emissions not expended through the use of their platforms. Thanks, Dan. So now you have access to this information. So what do you do with it? How can this serve you? Well, now that you understand how much an average emissions can be saved if you choose to use online over in person, you can use that information to satisfy the demands of your clients to understand the sustainable work that you're doing. You're part of a supply chain for somebody else as well, and I'm sure that all of the major publicly traded corporations are asking in the RFPs to understand their supply chain's sustainability impact, and this is information that you can use to serve that demand. And it's also possible if you want to calculate specifically the exact carbon emission savings for a particular project or for your company over the course of a year, those calculations can be conducted as well. If that's not accessible to you, you definitely can have access to sort of the average, as long as you're clear when you're presenting the information what it actually represents. This information can also be used for your company's internal sustainability operations and reporting. You can tell your employees about this. You can use it in your own reporting system that goes out to your stakeholders to say, yes, we understand the impact of the choices that we're making, and this is the impact that we're having. And demonstrating that you have a sustainability program can go back to that one of the earlier slides that talks about the reasons that businesses see a benefit for having sustainability programs. And then there's lots happening in the sustainability world. It's evolving really, really quickly, and there are some future considerations. What I'm seeing is that there's an increase in regulatory mandated greenhouse gas reporting. So large emitters and big companies are being demanded by law to report their greenhouse gas emissions. And while this is typically for scope 1 and scope 2, it's starting to roll into scope 3 as well. And the number of companies that fall within this umbrella of regulatory reporting is actually growing. As countries are moving towards net zero, they're starting to push this farther and farther into industry. Having a sustainability program and talking about carbon impact can actually also influence your reputation. It can demonstrate that you are, if not a leader, then certainly keeping up with the Joneses, and not a laggard when it comes to things that matter to your clients and to your customers, to your employees, to all of your stakeholders. That you're having these conversations, that you're definitely on your radar, you're aware. And then there's always, a few other things on the distant horizon. There's starting to be opportunities to participate in green finance and green insurance products. So if you can demonstrate that you're a green business, that you're operating sustainably, then it may open up doors for you to have reduced fees for financial products, loans, insurance products, because those are also, financial institutions are also large publicly traded organizations that are getting pressure from their shareholders to make sure that their supply chain is also sustainable. So if you meet the targets, you get a discount. If you don't meet the targets, you get a penalty. And these are just a few examples of how this information regarding sustainability of online qualitative research can be used to support your business. And Dan may have some other thoughts of this as well.
Well, thank you, Jacqueline. And before we go to questions, there are a couple of points. Like, if you haven't considered, building a sustainability program, I highly recommend you reach out to Jacqueline. It was very enlightening to me. It was something I have to admit. I took it on and thinking, this is going to be a lot of fluff and perhaps a lot of work in the everyday life that you have going on at a research facility. But it is something that has so greatly impacted our business and just the way we operate and the way we think, and then ultimately how we present ourselves. And I know I can tell you right now it's had a positive financial impact on our business. So if it's something you don't have in place and you're considering, I highly recommend you reach out to Jacqueline. And then the other thing is that this data is available in a report. It is important enough data, we felt, that it should be shared with the research industry. So if you are either a supplier in the industry and you want to get a hold of this information, or you're a buyer of market research and you want to understand it, we will make this information available to you because it is important and it's worthy of telling. So with that, I think we're close to where we want to be in the program. Again, I'd hope to give you a few minutes back and not take the full hour. I'm going to pass the baton back to Garnett, and if there's any questions that either myself or Jacqueline can answer, we'd welcome that.
But while Garnett is getting that lined up, I just want to say thank you to Dan and to acknowledge the fact that while Itracks did the heavy lifting and did the effort of putting together the calculations, by providing this more broadly, it certainly speaks to their overall sustainability program and their intent to ensure that we have a healthy economy by supporting society, which is embedded within a healthy environment. So making this sort of publicly available through their labor is actually a very, very kind and meaningful act.
I'd love to remind them to add the questions. Hello, so thank you very much, Jackie and Dan, for the excellent presentation. So we do have some questions from our audience. Please feel free to add the questions into the bottom of the GoToWebinar panel, and we'd love to take some feedback and questions from our audience today. So first up here, a question. You mentioned that certain people can generate these calculations for certification or carbon trading purposes. Can you elaborate on that?
Mm-hmm. So there are carbon markets that exist independently across the world, such as in Europe. California has its own carbon trading system. There's one in Alberta, in Canada as well. And each of these trading systems has specific requirements in order to qualify to be able to sell carbon savings that you generate, or to purchase credits to sort of offset the carbon that you're generating. There's really strict guidelines. They need to make sure that the carbon credits aren't sold twice, that they are calculated according to an adequate standard, so that you're not overestimating the carbon that's being calculated. And I know, at least in Canada, that the calculations need to be validated and verified by specific companies that go through an accreditation process, and in some instances it requires a professional engineer to be involved in the process, particularly if you're trying to assess life cycle calculations or comparing technologies. I hope that answers that question.
Great, thanks, Jacqueline. All right, next, we had a general comment from one of our participants that was very excited about the initiative. So I'm really keen to understand how to measure the impact for all methodologies, Qual and Quant. Is this a conversation we can include you in as it evolves? So from Itracks perspective, absolutely. But then he goes on to say, I'm really keen to promote collaboration across the industry when it comes to sustainability and pushing towards a net zero future. So I encourage our audience, if you are interested, feel free to put your name in the chat or follow up. We'll send a follow-up email. And if you're interested in continuing the conversation and maybe even looking at the quantitative aspects of the industry, feel free to engage, and we'd love to continue the conversation.
I love that. I love that comment, and I see the evolution of sustainability practice and businesses supporting one another, sort of paralleling where safety in industry was a couple of decades ago, and really supported the rapid advancement in safety, and I'm hoping that that can happen in sustainability as well.
Very exciting. All right, our next question here. You mentioned that certain people can generate these calculations for certification. Sorry, you mentioned that certain people can generate these calculations for certification or carbon trading. Oh, we did that one, I'm sorry. Which international standard do most of these carbon markets start with? If requirements are different, it would be nice to know if there was at least a basis.
So there is an international standard that's being developed. It's at the draft stage by the International Sustainability Standards Board. Up to this point, most reporting systems rely on the Task Force for Carbon Task Force for Financially Related Carbon Disclosure, Climate Disclosure, TFCD, one of the alphabet soup. Yeah, that's definitely sort of a foundation. And then it tends to also get partnered with some other reporting standards, like GRI or SASB, again, alphabet soup. But there is some exciting work towards standardization, although Europe and North America currently are not going down the alignment path yet. Hopefully they will get there soon. Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosure. Got it.
Great, thanks, Jacqueline. All right, our next question here. As a client of Itracks, can you assist us with applying your model to our groups that have transitioned from traditional to online to calculate the savings?
Absolutely. We'd love to do that because we've done this work, and we can take the model that we've applied, and then perhaps you know, in your specific work or with different clients, that model looks slightly different. But certainly be able to talk to you about how we could develop either a plan or even some marketing around that.
Great. Thanks, Dan. All right, so we are to the end of our questions. I want to express a huge thank you to Dan and Jacqueline for their presentation today. Very informative and very helpful. We have had numerous people ask if the session was being recorded and is shareable. So absolutely, we've recorded the session. We will make it available on the Itracks website, and we'll send a link out to everybody that registered so that they can view it. There has also been requests for the slides, so so we can follow up for those that would like a PDF copy of the slides to share as well. Thanks everyone for joining. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye-bye.